All right, I think we can go ahead and get rolling. Thank you all for coming. Good afternoon. Welcome to our research series that our office conducts with research and development. So today we're talking about data privacy and security, which you think is not super exciting all the time, but they think it's super exciting.
We're super exciting.
I know. But it's so super important, as you know, if you're conducting any research and if you're conducting anything really throughout the organization, an academic health center, it's very important, but particularly when you're conducting research, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So today we have Rob Morales, who is the Director of Information Security, Compliance, and Risk. And then we also have Brenda Manning, who is the Director of Privacy. And so she describes herself as the HIPAA person, the HIPAA person. So if you have any questions for them, feel free to interact throughout the discussion. This is the second time they're doing this, and the first one was super informative, and they probably have jazzed it up even more for this afternoon session, so it's going to be even better. So anyway, enjoy, and please join me in welcoming Rob and Brenda.
Well, I think it will be a little bit more jazzed up since it's not 7 a.m. in the morning. But as you mentioned, I'm Rob Morales. This is Brenda Manning. And our topic today is to discuss data protection and security surrounding, not only Coeur d'Alene Clinic from the Coeur d'Alene Clinic perspective, but also from a research perspective. So some of the things we'll talk about today. Why it's important to partner with PISO. As well as finding the why. Why are we protecting information? Why are we asking, why are Brenda and I asking the questions that we do to all of you that are requesting to do research? Also, just want to give a quick HIPAA refresher if you haven't already heard this from us before. And I think the real meat and potatoes is going to be with the privacy and security risks. We really want to, outlay that, and that's really also going to help explain the why and why we're doing what we do. And then lastly, any types of risk of noncompliance, what happens if things go south for us? And then afterwards, any Q&A. And again, this is an informal conversation, so please feel free to stop me at any point in time and ask any questions. So, partnering with PISO. Brenda and I both started on the same day, sat at the same table at NEO training about a year and a half ago now, I want to believe. And the initiative that Vicki Clevenger brought to us was to really build out the privacy and information security program and bring it to fruition. Part of the things that we're doing, we're collaborating with different areas, and one of them happens to be research. I want to say there's a lot of things that we've learned dealing with research because that's not been my background, and some of the concerns that people have addressed are that we're in the backstage of your IRB process, where we're viewed as a roadblock. And one of the things that we want to alleviate from that process is to be in the very forefront. So getting involved with feasibility meetings, providing information on the IRB applications that may be things you didn't quite know about. So that way, whenever you process a new application, we give you all the information that you need. Now, what exactly does privacy do, or PISO? Privacy and Information Security, I'm sorry. Some of the things that we handle staff education, we do vendor risk assessments, so any type of application or device that we're going to integrate to the network or store patient data, we want to assess that type of information, make sure it's safe. Handling business associate agreements, consultations, assessing and mitigating risk. Also in the process, working on developing policies and procedures. That way you have the tools up front to get anything answered. As well as just being a general resource for everybody. Now, as far as the why, I'm going to hand it off to the HIPAA person, and she's going to get into detail there.
Thanks, Rob. So I want to start off, before we get into a HIPAA refresher, just kind of having a general conversation. So again, don't let the podium be a barrier. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. I want to start off with this photo. So in this photo, what exactly do you see? What is this a picture of? Anyone? What do you see in this picture? Right. It's a picture of somebody looking at the EMR. And what does the EMR represent? Anybody?
Also burnout for people.
Right. It like represents patients, data. So, right. It represents, medical information. So what is this a picture of? What do we see in this photo? What does this kind of conjure up when you look at this? Right, it's a doctor consoling a patient. So the reason I bring this up, and the reason I put this in this presentation is because of this person sitting right here. This is Allison. This is Allison, who is the newest member of the compliance team. She's a PhD with respect to research, and she pointed out a great thing with respect to research and really with respect to healthcare in general that really got me thinking. So a lot of times we as healthcare professionals, and it doesn't matter if you're in research or regardless of your role, I think a lot of times we kind of lose the humanity of the situation, and we tend to think of patients as the medical record. We think of it as a diagnosis. We think of it as, patient so-and-so who's 85 with a diagnosis in room 123. And we forget about the fact that behind it is a person, is somebody who is, somebody's mom, somebody's sister, somebody's friend. So I encourage you to always remember the humanity with respect to healthcare, and remember the patient that is behind it. So I thank you for that, Allison. So why do patients share their PHI with us? They do so we can treat them, diagnose them, and support them. So who exactly are our patients? Well, think back to that other photo. They're our friends, our family members, members of our community, and maybe even you. So why is it important we protect PHI? Here we have a little note. It says people buy from people we trust. So people often start with the first thing on the screen here. It's the law, it's HIPAA, that's why we protect patient information, right? Well, are there any other reasons that we can think of? Why should we protect patient information? Anyone? Right. It builds trust with our patients and our community, but there's another reason. Because of this, because we're a Carillion, right? That's what we do. It's the right thing to do. That's why we protect patient information. So don't just do it because it's the law. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit reason. Do it because it's the right thing to do. And also, do we have any physicians in the room? Right, we have some physicians in the room. So as physicians, confidentiality is very important to that relationship. It's a pillar to that relationship. So it's important that all of us support our physicians, and we can do that by protecting patient privacy. So we're going to have a little surprise quiz right now with respect to privacy. So according to a survey of medium to large size healthcare entities, what is the leading cause of HIPAA breaches? So we have 4 choices here. What do you think is the leading cause of breaches in healthcare? Just shout out an answer. What do you think? Christina knows the answer, so she can't answer. She used to work in privacy.
Probably B.
Right, it's B. Snooping in patient medical records, both paper and electronic. That is correct. Very good. Okay, one more question. In a 2016 study by Black Book, what % of U.S. patients state they withheld some medical information from their providers due to privacy or security concerns? We have 4 choices here. What do you think?
Probably C or D. I think that's a lot.
Right, it is a lot. So if you remember your HIPAA in service, I was in the video in the beginning, I actually gave this statistic. It's D, 89%. So let's talk about that statistic. So patients obviously freely share information with their providers, but what's behind the 89% statistic? So patients are concerned with certain types of information. And the reason I included this in the presentation is because it's probably the type of information that might come up in the research context. So it's information such as chronic conditions, financial information, mental health information, things along that line, pharmaceuticals, things that are kind of like super sensitive type information. So our patients are very concerned about that type of information and sharing that with their providers. So is privacy important to our patients? Yes, absolutely. So we're going to do a little HIPAA refresher right now. So with respect to HIPAA, there's the privacy rule and the security rule. Those are the two main parts of the rule that we're concerned about. So the privacy rule tells us how to use and disclose patient information. So we can basically use and disclose patient information for 3 reasons without patient authorization, and that is treatment, payment, and healthcare operations. Everything else requires patient authorization. With regard to the security rule, that does exactly what it sounds like. It tells us what we have to do in order to secure patient information. So, is everyone familiar with the Notice of Privacy Practices here at Carilion? Do you know what that is when I mention that? So, it's like a large poster-sized document you'll see located throughout our facilities. It's also a document that as a patient you are able to receive like a paper copy of that. That sets forth how we use and disclose patient information. It's a very easy to read document, kind of a roadmap with respect to what we do with PHI. And it also establishes or kind of outlines the rights that patients have with respect to their information. So when it comes to medical research, this is what our NOP, or our Notice of Privacy Practices, says with regard to medical research. And I'll read it to you. It says, conducting medical research is an important part of Carilion Clinic's mission. Federal regulations, that be HIPAA, permit use of your health information in medical research, either with your authorization or when the research study is reviewed and approved by an IRB before the study begins. In some situations, limited information may be used before approval of the study to allow a researcher to determine whether enough patients exist to make a study scientifically valid. So if you're wondering what we do with regard to research, it's in our NOP and it's subject to HIPAA. So at this point, does anybody have any questions? Anybody on the webinar? Okay, good. Well, just keep trekking along here. So protected health information, the definition's on the screen here. It's information about a patient's past, present, or future physical or mental condition, their provision of health care, and it somehow reasonably identifies the patient. So let's take a look at what that is. And you probably recognize this information from your IRB applications. It's these 18 identifiers. So I point out number 15 and number 18. So full face or comparable photos. What would be an example of a full face or a comparable photo? So suppose that you have a patient that maybe had an accident at the 4th of July and they had an injury to their hand. Since we live in Roanoke and it's a very small community, if you take a photo of that hand injury, something like that could be considered identifiable because perhaps it was in the news and there was only one patient that had that injury. So even though we don't have the patient's face in the photo, that particular injury could be considered identifiable based on our territory. So any other unique identifier, what's an example of that? So suppose we said, we were talking about a patient in kind of a cryptic way, and we said, the CEO of a healthcare organization in Southwest Virginia. Well, who are we talking about? We're talking about Nancy Agee. So that's an example of a way that you can talk about someone in a cryptic way and you're still identifying the person without using their name. So that's kind of an extreme example, but that's a way that you can talk about someone in a unique way. So let's talk about some privacy and security risks and then apply some best practices for how we can, or with respect to those risks. So here's a question that we get often. I have access to Epic, so why can't I just look at whatever I want with that access? So the first risk that we want to address is Epic use policy. So with respect to accessing Epic, it's important to remember that you can only access the minimum amount of PHI to accomplish your intended purpose. So here's a copy of our Epic use policy. And as I said before, when it comes to patient information, you're allowed to access information for 3 reasons without patient authorization. The first one is treatment. It's kind of obvious, treating the patient, payment, or healthcare operations. So what is healthcare operations? That's things like quality reviews, compliance activities, risk activities, things such as that. Again, subject to the minimum necessary rule. And then here at Carilion, we allow individuals to view their own record. And then, we have an audit trail, so we know everything that people do in Epic as well. With respect to the things that are not permitted, we have a list here on this screen. So things like modifying your own record, accessing records for education purposes that are not part of a formal activity, accessing records for quality assurance activities that are not part of a formal quality review, things like that are not allowed. So let's take a look at things that are allowed with respect to research. You can access Epic for research if it's approved by the IRB, and this includes activities that are preparatory to research. With respect to education, you can access information in Epic for research purposes if the patient approves and you were directly involved in the patient's care or assigned a task. So how do you know if a patient has approved? There is a flag that is in Epic if they have opted out of this. And with respect to quality assurance and quality improvement, if you can access it if it's a task that you are formally assigned to do. We also have a privacy guideline with respect to that you should have been provided a copy with. Otherwise, you can always contact the privacy office with questions. Risk number 2, protect your access and your assets. Does everyone recognize this document? This is the Access and Confidentiality Agreement. Very important to be familiar with this document. Do not share your passwords. Intentional sharing of information is a huge risk, as well as tailgating. Do you know what tailgating is? Okay, we have some people shaking their heads, so I'll explain what that is. That's like, letting people into secure areas. So if you have, are your research areas secure? Like with badge access, things like that. Very important to make sure that you don't let people into those areas who shouldn't be in there. Is everyone familiar with phishing? Okay, Rob will talk about that in a bit, but very important to be mindful of phishing. Misdirected communications. Very important to not multitask when handling sensitive information. One of the biggest issues that I see in the privacy office is with respect to communications of patient information that are misdirected. So what I mean by that is it's either electronic communications via email or paperwork being handed or directed somehow to the incorrect party, electronic paper. And you know what almost all those cases have in common? It's people are doing multiple things at the same time. So very important to not multitask when you're handling sensitive information. Just focus on the task at hand. And other things you can do, like verify email addresses, pick up your printouts as soon as possible, use pre-programmed fax numbers. Very, very important, just kind of little things that you can do to protect patient confidentiality. And with that, I will hand it off to Rob.
Break everything here.
Who's breaking things over
I
here?
know, I try. So texting has been a hot topic ever since I started working here at Carilion. I know the big question is, why can't I text PHI from my phone? A lot of misconception with cell phones are that, because I have that 6-digit PIN on my phone, that it's secure and no one can actually see messages. And it's pretty false. SMS text messages are the most easily intercepted form of communication. What happens is let's just say you probably have your personal email on your phone as well. Maybe you click, open up an email. that has a malware in it, or you have a game that you might download on your phone from the App Store, a lot of times they actually have what's called a man-in-the-middle malware attack, where they will intercept all of your messages. And it's a very easy process, very easy backdoor item to do. So what we're trying to, or what we are integrating in November is the Perfect Serve application. So what that does is that actually provides a secure manner of texting any type of PHI from clinician to clinician. The nice feature with it is you log in once, you're logged into the application at all points in time. So that's the positive with it, and that helps us remove that complexity of potentially exposing information. Again, I believe it's rolling out the end of November, if I'm not mistaken. Any questions about the Perfect Serve piece? It's a nice tool. It's a long time coming, so we'll be glad to finally roll that out to everybody. But what exactly can you text from your phone? Really, that's kind of what Brenda mentioned before as far as the unique identifiers. If you're talking about something for work, just make sure there's no unique identifiers, removing any types of pictures. Sometimes people send pictures of patients. I would strongly advise not, or staying as far away from that as possible. But again, we're going to provide you the tools necessary. I know a lot of people were worried about having to log in and log out of the application. That's not the case with this. You log in once, your password is saved, and you're good to go. Now, as far as the electronic devices, a lot of times, I would say there's a percentage of people that use personal devices for work-related purposes, whether it be laptops, whether it be cell phones, iPads, tablets, especially with the integration of Office 365. The one thing that we would say is that any security settings that we provide, I would try not to disable them, again, because they help protect information. And it was funny, there was I think it's funny, Microsoft had a huge vulnerability due to a type of malware. They provided a security setting for Microsoft to say, enable this and you'll be fine. Well, it caused some headaches for people's workflows, so there's organizations that actually removed the security setting and then brought on the vulnerability to their organization. So just those are the types of things that happen, and there's a reason that they're there. So just keep those in mind. And also protecting your devices. So especially if you're using your own personal device, they're not encrypted. So for any clinic issued phone or laptop, we do have encryption in place. So if you do lose that, from a safe harbor perspective, we're good to go. We don't have to report anything as a breach, because a lot of the times that you might have PHI, some form of database, some form of Excel sheet on your computer, and if someone can easily crack into that, especially if it's a personal device, that really puts the organization and yourself at risk. So things to keep in mind. Also, using portable drives. If you're ever using a flash drive or a portable hard drive, I would always err on the side of caution and contact TSG as far as what kind of parameters should you do in purchasing your own. So we can let you know if it's encrypted or not, what would be the best practice for using the devices. I would use us as a leverage in case you have that flash drive or you have that portable hard drive and you leave it in your car and someone breaks into it, or you misplace it somewhere. So just some items to keep in mind from that piece. We do provide the secure access points to get into Epic, get into Office 365. So, just making sure if you're accessing any type of application from a public Wi-Fi or whatnot, I would just err on the side of caution, make sure that you're not facing people, and just be careful when you're accessing that. Let's see what else. Downloading software and unapproved, or freeware, what it's called. So there are a lot of times where there's a lot of applications that might be suitable to download to your computer. There's nothing wrong with that. what I would do is, if there is a program, we had an instance of a resident wanting to download a particular calculator for pharmacy. So in that instance, we're able to scan the device, make sure there's nothing inappropriate on it before he downloads it to his Curlian Clinic laptop. What we look for in these types of software are, what additional software are you getting with it? Because it's never just that one particular software. Sometimes if it's, if they're trying to be egregious, they do have some form of backdoor malware that will come along with it. And at that point in time, they can exfiltrate information. We've seen it happen before. So just keep that in mind. And even when you're downloading apps on your phone, there are sites out there that will certify that application as being secure. It's called TrustE. It's the stamp of approval to say that that's a secure application. The reason for Google Drive and Dropbox has always been a big one as well. The reason that we stay away from personal Google Drives and Dropboxes, not just because it's not secure, but also what happens, let's just say you put hundreds or thousands of patients on that Google Drive and Dropbox, and for some reason you might have used your normal email username and password, and that gets compromised, and they log into Google Dropbox and steal that information because they see that you have it. Well, at that point in time, we have a breach, and we also don't have what we mentioned earlier as far as the business associate agreement. So we can't hold them liable, and we are 100% liable for that breach. So that's why whenever we try to provide services like AWS or Office 365, we want to make sure that we have those types of agreements in place from a due diligence and as well as a liability standpoint. So that's one of the big reasons why we do that. I mentioned portable drives and flash drives. Now, speaking of emails and passwords and whatnot, phishing has been the bane of our existence for quite some time. I would say a majority, as you can see here from the Verizon breach report, 32% of breaches occur because of phishing attacks. And what happens is they're trying to get your personal information. They want to surprise you, get your username and password, get access to your information. And then at that point, they can log in, cause all kinds of damage to not only you, but also the organization. So as you can see, 28% involve malware infections, 29% involve stolen credentials. So here at Carilion, to show some perspective, we receive about 7,000 phishing attacks a month. I would say a majority of those are blocked, but those are items that we are trying to safeguard. We are seeing an increase in targeted attacks, not only to executives, but also to clinicians. What we've seen recently is that folks will try to get your bank account information because they want to receive your paychecks. So they will get that. They'll try to go through MTA, which is the My Total Access, reroute your banking account information to some Walmart account, and you won't even know about it until you get, end of the month. So they do these types of things. They're not always just interested in PHI. They want our personal information. They also like to pretend that they are the executive. So we do get a lot of people pretending to be Nancy Agee, NL Bishop, Patrice Weiss. So this does happen. It's very easy to look on LinkedIn and find out who our executives are. So, and then just spoof that email and they're good to go. Now,
Can I ask you a question? Robert?
Yeah.
When you, there's that phishing at curlingclinic.org where you can forward all potential phishing attacks. Does that not open things up any different? Aren't you spreading the potential phishing attack if you're forwarding it, or is that super secure?
well, no, so if you forward the phishing email, it's forwarding to one person who's scanning the email, and at that point in time, we have the ability to say if it's a phishing attack or not, and pull it from not only your email box, from anybody else that received that email.
So as long as you're not clicking on any links within the email.
Yeah, I would stay away from clicking on the links. Okay. So that brings up a good point. And I'll get to that in a sec. Or actually, I'll get to it right now. Why not? If you ever feel that an email is suspicious, you can easily send it to phishing@curlingclinic.org, and a member from the security team will review it, let you know it's legitimate or not before you open it. You can easily, you don't have to click on anything, you can just forward it as an email, and that's it. If you think it's suspicious, I'd obviously avoid clicking on any links, opening the email up in its entirety, or also forwarding it to other people. A lot of times people will forward it to their boss, who will forward it to me, who will forward it to the phishing inbox. So you're just increasing the risk the more you forward the email account. But one of the things we've done since I've started is we wanted to gauge what is our take on phishing attacks, and are we able to identify them. When we first started, we sent out an enterprise-wide attack, went out to everybody in the organization. What is it? It was 60% of all users clicked on the link, and 80% of that 60% put in their Active Directory credentials. So I had their username and password. And it was literally this email right here. Now, we've done much better. That was in the very beginning. We did in-service training, all kinds of talks. Now we're down to an 11% click rate, which is phenomenal, so kudos. But this is a typical email that you may get from folks. The big piece, call to attention. The email address is wrong. So what they'll do is they'll pretend to be Patrice Weiss. It'll say Patrice Weiss, but then it might say doctor@gmail.com. So always look at the name as well as the actual address itself. And any external email, not even just suspicious emails, but all external emails will have this yellow banner. So it's more so, it's not to say any email with this is terrible. It's just to, it gives you a heightened sense of security in looking at those. And having you click on links, that's the big one. They want you to either open up attachments, click on links that redirect you. So just keep in mind. And if you ever see those forwarded to the phishing email box, if you do click on something, you can always contact TSC immediately, and we'll stop everything to make sure we can address it. Because again, we don't want your credentials to be compromised or anything to happen to you or our patients. So what happens if things go sideways? If any information is breached from Carillion? Well, one of the big ones is reputation risk. I've worked with multiple healthcare organizations during breaches, 21st Century Oncology, Banner Health, Memorial Healthcare, and the reputation risk to the organization is dreadful. At this point in time, you have to get communications, you have to get HR involved. It's a very expensive process and a very long and arduous process to be able to fix that reputation. And especially for Carillion, because Carillion, we're the only health system in Southwest Virginia besides Lewis Gale or Centra in Lynchburg. So we have a lot to lose if something were to happen to us. Also, as we mentioned with HIPAA, there are regulatory enforcements that we have to worry about. But along with that, we have licensing board actions. This is really for any type of egregious acts that might occur. So if you're actually being malicious and stealing information, that would be something to consider. If I were to do that, I can lose my license. If you have certifications, your JD, you can lose your license as well. So things to keep in mind. And also civil and monetary penalties are involved with this. So kind of full circle, as I mentioned, we're not trying to be a stopgate. We're not trying to tell people no. We want you to be able to do research. We want you to be able to access information, have as much information that you need and that's necessary for your job, and just do it in a secure manner so that way you're safe, the organizations are safe, and the patients are safe. If you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We have multiple avenues, whether the phone number, we have the Privacy at Carillion Clinic, and then we also have a integrity helpline. So if you see any issues or want to address something and do it in an anonymous manner, you can always contact that line.